Travis strikes again. Haven't seen him do that in a while. Serving as a side project installment to No More Heroes, a game series that's been dormant for almost a decade. This will be a simple review, mainly covering the gameplay and presentation. I will make a full analysis video afterward, which will add to my Deadly Individualism series, but I figured some will be wondering what my initial thoughts are of Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes. I will be avoiding major spoilers, but keep in mind that I'm looking over the main experience from beginning to end. So if you're clueless about how most of the game appears, like I did when I first started playing, keep in mind that this video will show off almost all of them. For the beginning of this video, I will look at the game's reveal trailer and the rather interesting feedback it received before officially launching. If you're simply curious about my thoughts on the game itself, skip to this time. Suda51 made an appearance at the first conference for Nintendo Switch in January of 2017, and people understandably assumed the project he was talking about would become No More Heroes 3, clean cut. This was still what a lot of folks were thinking when the game was revealed as Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes. I guess they didn't notice No More Heroes was the subtitle for this game. What should I expect? Most people don't even get the name right.
We had more information on Travis Strikes Back.
I digress, they didn't show any gameplay in that reveal trailer. However, you should keep in mind that even Suda himself wasn't sure what should be next for our favorite otaku assassin at the time. Regardless, a good amount of people were definitely vocal about how much they detest this game's potential existence once gameplay was revealed. Before reviewing Travis Strikes Again, I feel the need to address the most common complaints I've been hearing between the initial announcement and now. Just like everyone expressing their qualms, I don't have any real intel on what goes on within Grasshopper. Despite that, I think I have a few logical conclusions that might make you think twice about dishing out the more typical grievances and actually play the game instead of immediately deciding what you hate months before it's even out. He can make a game just like No More Heroes 1 and 2, he has the power to do so. Whether he does or doesn't is pretty irrelevant. Suda created a small team to work on this new title because that's exactly what he wanted, a small team. Just like when it came to the games he made early in his career, such as Moonlight Syndrome and The Silver Case. Even then, I don't think it's crazy to theorize that most of his company was still working on Let It Die when production of Travis Strikes Again began in May of 2017. With Let It Die's success, extensive schedules of new content, constant updates with bug fixes or improvements, and the recent PC port, it looks like they're still pretty busy. But that might end soon. It's no mystery that the people within Grasshopper fluctuate very often as well. Suda's little team started with 5 people but would eventually grow to about 15. Still less than the roster behind No More Heroes, it was more like some indie dev team, which led Suda to take this installment in a completely new direction. I think the most relieving bit of news between early interviews and now is that Suda explained he dropped the idea of receiving great assistance from other indie dev teams for the production of this title.
Do any other indie games have a larger role than just the shirts?
So at first, he really was considering doing a much deeper collaboration with multiple games, even going as far as to make some stages within TSA based on indie games. But then he realized that doing that would require double and triple checks to make sure everything is true to the original, and there was just absolutely no time for such a lengthy cycle. So unfortunately, he just had to keep it at t-shirts.
Thank goodness for that, since it meant his essence will surely be present and it means he's more in control that way. It's all being done in-house and the design isn't dependent on the help of overseas indie teams. Well, except one. What's especially funny to me is how many Grasshopper followers shit all over his massive projects that had huge teams and other people influencing those games more than he was, such as Shadows of the Damned and Lollipop Chainsaw, but immediately discredit Travis Strikes Again despite that it oozes so much of his older roots they go crazy over and are less likely to be tainted by other creators. Come on, he's the main director and can finesse everything in it through his own mind again, something he hasn't done since the original No More Heroes. I legitimately think people that rant and rave about all his work up to 2008 and refuse to accept anything he did afterward don't really know what they want from him. That's the line in the sand I'm drawing, here and now. Why didn't he just make No More Heroes 3 instead? That would sell so well. A sequel after complete absence almost 10 years later? Maybe if we were talking about something like Resident Evil or various Nintendo IPs, but we aren't. It's a case-by-case basis. No More Heroes 1 certainly sold fine, considering it had a marketing budget of 50 cents, coincidentally how much it cost to put a Nintendo exclusive game on Nintendo Power Cocksucker magazine back in 2007, but No More Heroes 2 underperformed, considering the expectations of game sequels that are created in a reasonable time frame and was a divisive game in and of itself. Some people liked how they simplified an already simple game, and others did not enjoy the tedium of the core gameplay or how shallow the story felt. The point is that Travis Touchdown, the representative of No More Heroes, fell into complete obscurity. Sure, the game is brought up every time Suda51 is discussed, but so is Killer 7. And it's not like No More Heroes can be purchased on current platforms right now, so bringing it up doesn't suddenly surge the financial success the franchise has, or make the potential of the series viable enough to justify something like No More Heroes 3. And with all due respect to Suda and his gang, bringing up an old Wii game won't make people suddenly interested in a third installment, even if there were recent ports, which there still aren't. Don't type in the comments yet, I'll be addressing that in just a bit. No, don't. Get your hands off that keyboard, stop. Keep listening. The original games shined as strange entries with over-the-top violence for the Wii, a console marketed to be family-friendly, but that spotlight is long gone, and I think Suda is aware of that. He needed an interesting way to show new players who Travis is. Let the kiddies of this era discover the cool, uncool goofball otaku us old heads already love. It's like Travis himself says in the trailer.
I've been away a long time. There's a new generation of gamers out there. Let me at least introduce myself.
Why do an original spin-off? Why not make the series relevant again with the port of No More Heroes 1 and 2 on Switch? Where's the fun in that? Suda likes to be creative when it comes to his work. The concept of his game was clearly in his head before Travis even became part of the picture. I understand that simple porting jobs can be a solid plan, but if you think about it, among the insurmountable number of ports we've been receiving since the beginning of the 7th generation, the ones that aim to bring their dormant respective series back to relevancy almost always fails to do so. Capcom laid the groundwork to make Devil May Cry relevant with its multiple HD ports of the trilogy and updating the 4th title for new hardware. Hell, even their attempt at a reboot helped resurge the original series if you ask me. From what I can tell, it was perfect soil for planting Devil May Cry 5. Like 10 years later than it should have been. Although it still isn't out yet, who knows how well it'll actually sell. The same can basically be said about Bayonetta in regards to the upcoming 3rd title. I mean, I hope they do well. Might be worth bringing up that this plan didn't turn out so well for Dead Rising 4's sales figures, wink wink, and assuming those hack and slash franchises become successful with their new entries, No More Heroes does not have the same kind of legacy or pull as Devil May Cry. That genre-defining classic inspired an impressive number of games. Devil May Cry has almost a mountain of a legacy in its name, which is more than the molehill that No More Heroes is attached to. Let's take a look at this situation in a different perspective as well, that of a typical Switch player who may not be familiar with the games. If Marvelous, the owners of the franchise, were to just release No More Heroes 1 and 2 onto the Switch, we'd be receiving yet more ports of old video games in that crowded eShop of theirs. The console itself already has this bad stigma of getting port after port after port of all these old games, and even charging more than other platforms, drawing extra negative feedback to the library. The attention this franchise has been receiving through Travis Strikes Again on social media and game journalism sites is objectively more than it would have if Marvelous re-released yet another couple ports of old games for the Switch. LA Noire sold a decent chunk on the console, but it was still forgotten shortly after, and Killer 7 Steam Edition kind of just came and went, besides the occasional grateful PC player that is able to enjoy the definitive experience. To be frank, considering how many times I've played No More Heroes 1 and 2 for the past decade, I'm much more interested in a brand new unique side adventure than playing the old games again on a different console. However, don't get me wrong, it'll be awesome if they port the original games to Nintendo Switch after Travis Strikes Again, with some quality of life enhancements, and at a reasonable price. Please. Then it will be perfect to hype up a true sequel, especially as a means to show players that enjoyed the spin-off to check out what made Travis so cool and uncool in the first place. I doubt the more linear design will be an issue for people that started with Travis Strikes Again. The original No More Heroes titles are simple enough games. I'm sure newcomers can still get into it. I hate how they're holding No More Heroes 3 hostage, relying on the sales of this game. That's messed up. This outcry comes from a handful of interviews. Suda talked about the potential of making a true sequel to No More Heroes 2, that it's a sure thing if Travis Strikes Again does well, which is the case for any game and their potential for a sequel, especially for a series that was out of the spotlight for this long. This game in the series sold well? Cool, let's keep it going. And when a game doesn't sell well, then that's usually all she wrote. He would be saying the exact same thing if he was only porting the original games without the existence of Travis Strikes Again. Hell, No More Heroes 2 didn't do well, and look what happened. The series got shelved away for nearly a decade. This is such a ridiculous complaint. When you watch a movie and liked it, do you get mad if the people who made it say something like, if it sells enough tickets, we'll make another movie for sure? Are you upset over No More Heroes 2 existing just because it wouldn't have without one's feedback and sales? Are you mad that Suda said if the Killer 7 Steam port does well, it'll convince him to pursue a new installment in the future? Do you realize how dumb you sound? Come the fuck on. He isn't holding the game hostage or forcing people to buy this spin-off. He's trying to make No More Heroes less niche than it already was, while simultaneously making a unique game slathered in his essence. He wants the world of No More Heroes he loves to be more relevant, to be successful. Even with his punk philosophy, everyone should understand Grasshopper Manufacture is still a business. I don't understand how a developer being more open and honest than most calls for instant mistrust from his fans. Ridiculous. Travis Strikes Again is just a bunch of mini-games. I'm sorry. What? Is this just some knee-jerk reaction from people when a developer says their game spans across different playstyles? When I think of a bunch of mini-games, I think of Mario Party, WarioWare, Crash Bash. As for how Travis Strikes Again has been described, it reminded me of Earthworm Jim 2's philosophy and design. The core mechanics stayed mostly consistent from beginning to end, but each stage introduced different styles of design that changed the gameplay drastically, much like how Suda has described the separate worlds in Travis Strikes Again. I'll secede though that this misunderstanding could have come from how Suda first described the development of Travis Strikes Again early on. He was originally going to have a bunch of different indie developers take part in designing worlds, but later on explained that he dropped that approach so that people can have a more genuine Grasshopper experience from his game. So calm the hell down. Travis Strikes Again looks like a mobile game. The Switch is such an underpowered piece of crap. No More Heroes would do so much better if it was on something powerful like the PS4. My short response to messages like this is, fuck off fanboy, but I'll give you a long one too. Stop confusing simple artistry with bad graphics. Are you ready to say Killer 7 looks like crap just because of its cel-shaded style? Besides that, more powerful hardware doesn't automatically mean a game will turn out better. Hell, you don't have to look any further than No More Heroes itself. I've gone over how pathetic the PlayStation 3 port is previously. You don't even need to take my word for it. Suda himself prefers the Wii version, and not just because it's the one he directed. Better frame rate, textures that don't look ugly as shit, better sound design, smoother core gameplay. The list goes on. Ask this question to any fan of Grasshopper that's played their entire Western library. What is the company's two best games? You know what two games will show up the most? Killer 7 and No More Heroes. Both games in their respective generations that were exclusive to a console considered underpowered, and they're both fantastic games, sporting a level of artistry and unique direction that's appealing even to this day. Some of the most famous pieces of video game history were made within limitations, and artists won't suddenly become better when you give them more paint. So when all you can really dog on is the game's graphics, which if you ask me look pretty great, I'm not sure what the hell these people think they see. You just sound like the assholes back in 2008 immediately discrediting No More Heroes for being a Wii exclusive. At that point, all I really have left to say is, fuck off fanboy. In the midst of all this, please don't misconstrue what I'm saying. I'm not claiming everyone should get this game. I'll also secede that marketing for Travis Strikes Again has a ton of problems. Giving people the shortest peaks of those unique worlds with their own mechanics, but all the live demos are only the first world that has a very basic semblance of gameplay, it's bound to confuse people that don't read interviews, which one shouldn't expect all of them to. I understand though that the creators would want to keep most of the game a surprise. If you're aware of the various worlds and significant gameplay aspect changes and see it's still not for you, fine. If you don't dig the core gameplay, I can't say you're wrong, that's your prerogative, I get that. Hell, almost a year ago, I released a video where I expressed my qualms and concerns with what Suda showed and talked about regarding Travis Strikes Again. I was concerned that it wouldn't have the lone wolf aspect that I felt helped establish the original two games. The overhead gameplay looked like it would be a bit too cumbersome, and I was especially worried that all these indie dev teams that were originally going to design the separate worlds would cover up Suda's intent and vision. Have these concerns I expressed almost a year ago proved to be a detriment to the game, or was I proven wrong? You'll see shortly. I just think a lot of the early criticisms really clouded a good amount of people's thoughts on what Grasshopper showed and give the game an unfair disadvantage. It's bad enough that this is being released in January, after Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and immediately before the Resident Evil 2 remake and Kingdom Hearts 3.
So once you start getting bored with Smash Brothers, you think, I want to play another game. I hope you think of us.
You adorable oaf. Alright, let's get into what I think of Travis Strikes Again, No More Heroes. Talking about the gameplay, first and foremost, since it seems to be everyone's concern, as if No More Heroes 1 and 2 were some sort of technical marvels that challenged every single one of your senses and playing ability when they weren't. It's an isometric action game that is more in the realm of a beat 'em up than a hack and slash. What made the gameplay from No More Heroes stand out are the visuals and sound design. Travis Strikes Again, while obviously much different in appearance, delivers greatly in those aspects. The shattering noises and disintegration effects are very satisfying, especially when you get a good idea of how the combat works and start mowing down these bugs. The core gameplay is consistent throughout the game, but each game world adds a new element to it. They're not all drastic enough to make them feel like different games altogether. I mean, they don't want you to forget everything you just learned after all, but they want to keep you on your toes from beginning to end of this adventure. All of the worlds and their alterations in the design are callbacks to titles that helped shape Suda51 into the developer that he is now, from arcades to consoles, from the 80s to long after the 80s. The setting is games within games, so I'm not surprised that even the design of this title is also exactly that. It starts out innocently enough, letting you just mash your way through the first few waves, but soon after you learn you can't fuck around too much against the enemies. Once the swarms and meteor enemies come in, you have to consider your arsenal and how you're going to use them, your arsenal being the chips that you find. Similar to MOBA characters and their special abilities, this adds an extremely unique element to the No More Heroes series and adds a level of depth that those games never saw. But it isn't too complicated to scare off players. The amount of strategy needed to take on all these bugs is nothing groundbreaking, but certainly more than what you're led to assume from the early previews. The separate game worlds and what they offer that stay exclusive to them feels like an expansion to what Grasshopper provided in variety for the original game. Yeah, you still slash up a bunch of dudes and then fight a boss, but there's other things in between as well, like switch puzzles and platforming. Platforming in No More Heroes? And it doesn't feel like shit? Outrageous! The setting for Travis Strikes Again is pretty simple. Someone who goes by the name of Badman attacks Travis Touchdown in the trailer as an attempt to get revenge on him for murdering his daughter. During this squabble, they get sucked into a mysterious console known as the Death Drive Mark II, and so Badman must travel across these worlds with Travis in order to gain a grand prize the console will offer upon completion, any wish of his desire. As for the presentation in Travis Strikes Again, it's like no other. The aesthetic and environment are completely different in each world, and all of them are quite a sight to behold. Well, except for one. The harsh black shadows and the original game's visual appeal has also made a nice return. Everything surrounding the game console is also fantastic. How can you not love the chill blues you hear in the hub world? Very comfy. The digitized visual novels you experience between the worlds are also full of entertaining dialogue. Speaking of, the writing has a very interesting style. While I have expressed in the past that I'm tuckered out of these game within a game scenarios, and the title does play with the idea a bit much in its writing, it shifts quickly back to introspectiveness and intrigue. The quick turns this game takes with the writing are just ridiculous. I killed my own hero. I bet Devolver's gonna buy the rights. Alright, this is... Okay, you just ruined the feeling. It's gonna feature Travis Touchdown, like, as a sidekick or some shit. Oh my god, okay. That's... Alright. Alright. The dialogue can be pretty thought-provoking. You know, when it isn't making some reference or belittling me for my poor life decisions. Can it bug extra? I eat Taco Bell when I damn well please. The story also features a plethora of strange ties between No More Heroes and many other Grasshopper games. Basically, anything they maintain the rights to gets to make a guest appearance in one way, shape, or form. For fans of the company's previous works, they may jump for joy seeing some of these returning characters, but the context of them isn't that important for the most part. Don't be intimidated by that if you're a new player. If anything, it should encourage you to look into Suda51's previous work after you've completed this game. So, in the end, what do I think about this game? Some of you might already know I had a lot of concern over the development during early previews. I was afraid it wouldn't be different from another Gauntlet game or something like that. I was greatly mistaken. It's an extremely unique beat 'em up that likes to deviate with mechanics unique to the game worlds. enemies that test your spacing and strategy, and ridiculous cooperative play that ups the enemy count and challenge. A few bits that annoyed me would be how well the enemies can tank through your attacks. I don't mind tough baddies, of course, but sometimes I felt I had no choice but to resort running around and waiting for my skill chips to recover. I also think it's complete bullshit that enemies can still claw away at you when you've been knocked down. I swear, a few times felt like I was going to get killed because they can actually chain knockdown attacks at you. Another thing, I'm not entirely sure if this was an oversight by the developers or they were severely punishing me and my friend for trying to exploit the Life is Destroyed puzzles, but we actually got stuck with no way to escape when separating, and using continue didn't help since it just meant we were both stuck in the same spot. It's basically a soft lock since all we could do at that point was leave the world. Still, it was kind of our fault as it is. One last bit of criticism. The clothing line is cool, for the most part, but some of these designs are just uncreative. Wow, the Messenger really had a brainstorm for that one, huh, Sabotage Studios? I assume the t-shirt designs were left on the separate developing team's hands, considering the level of creativity and subtlety behind these t-shirt designs are all over the place. On top of that, I know they're super proud of making an Unreal game that actually runs well, but why did the logo get so much special treatment? You would think Epic Games funded this or something. I'd also have like different jacket options or have the option to remove it altogether. Some of these fun t-shirts get obscured with no way to ever see the entire face of it in game. Travis Strikes Again is better than No More Heroes 2. Much better. At least if we're talking purely at a core gameplay standpoint. After all, No More Heroes 2 barely tried to challenge you at all, so you can essentially do the same spammy combos from beginning to end of that monotonous campaign. Travis Strikes Again not only throws various different challenges your way, you can experiment greatly with the different skill chips you can use during combat, and there's a ton of them to find in the game. The story is also much better than anything by the company after the first No More Heroes title. As much as I support those games, it's so nice to see a story that was both written and directed by the man himself once again. While he wants his essence to bleed onto all of the Grasshopper developers, there's something different when he's writing and directing it himself. If I can summarize what Travis Strikes Again feels like, I would say it's kind of like if the Silver Case or Killer 7 became self-aware, but an entitled, arrogant asshole invaded either world and ran amok. Because that's what Travis is. And while there isn't that much voice acting, it didn't really hinder my experience. Come on, you're going to tell me the only good video game stories had full-length voice acting? Get out of here. I'm extremely satisfied with this game. While it has some noticeable faults, like how the combat can be grating depending on what they throw your way and how much the dreaded word gamer is used, it's what I like in Suda51 and his company. It's an experience like no other. It's a game that's fun, but also has an interesting story to tell. This was 100% made for the fans, but also newcomers that want to play something that feels more like previous generation gaming that got right to the action immediately. And I hope fans and other people interested can look past a lot of the undeserved backlash this game received in reviews by both game journalists and cynical internet personalities. I'm obviously not saying this game is flawless or only deserves praise. Hell, as far as I can tell, this game in the review sphere is performing as well as literally any other Grasshopper game. What you have is a man who is creating this wild celebration of multiple game generations. It's his homage to all these arcade games with its simplistic gameplay and multiple styles, honoring some of the best indie game developers the industry has witnessed. Even with the unique narrative layered between scenarios, Travis Strikes Again is aware of itself and doesn't want to get caught up in its storytelling too much. It's the most gamey game I've played in a long time, and it's really sad to see how many people were ready to reject it before and after. Still, I'm certainly happy with it. I hope the fans are happy with it. I want Suda51 to keep exploring his creativity in future installments. That includes the eventual No More Heroes 3. Speaking of finishing this new game, I think now is the perfect time to get No More Heroes 1 and 2 onto the Switch. Anyone that played Travis Strikes Again is now aware of how much of an epic gamer he is. So I think now it's time they see him for his more visceral talent as a skilled assassin. And I guess that's it. Oh wait, there's one more concern I forgot to address. How will this introduce new players to No More Heroes? Are they even going to like Travis Strikes Again as their first entry or even be interested in the previous games? I actually don't know. Obviously too soon to discuss overall sales, and I'm not really sure even now if this is a great starting point for people. But I did manage to get some opinions from fresh minds that have never experienced a No More Heroes title. Switch owners that decided to make Travis Strikes Again their introduction to this series. Here we have Glen Shiraishi. I am familiar with Suda51 as I did play a good few of his games like Lollipop Chainsaw, Killer's Dead, and Ranko Tsukigime's Longest Day, but I haven't played No More Heroes 1 or 2, but experienced them mostly secondhand. I am about a few hours into the game and so far I've been having a lot of fun. It definitely has a lot of the style that Suda tends to put in his games, even for something as overdone and meta as the game within a game type of storyline. Some of the jokes did get a chuckle out of me, and combat is simple but pretty fun, especially with the skills that you get throughout your adventures in the games. The music done by Kazuhiro Aibo is also amazing. I also love how this feels like a tribute to games in general, and I hope it does well enough for Grasshopper to get No More Heroes 3 off the ground. Despite the mixed reviews, I am having a good time. And here's Neinos. The departure from what I'd seen compared to the previous games, which I never played before, irked me initially, but I really warmed up to it after a while. The big difference is obviously the perspective, since it's a hack and slash like its predecessors. I'm okay with this. The aspect ratio change was also something I really liked. Just hits the right notes. I love it so far. Definitely gonna check out the first two down the road. Here we go from someone that goes by the name Rain. Overall combat is pretty fun, and Grandpa's wisdom was really funny. The game, while pretty linear, has just enough secrets to make stages not feel boring. I'm playing on Bitter and keeping my guys at level 1, and I feel like this is the difficulty level the game is balanced around. Pretty decent challenge. The visual novel bits I enjoyed, but was kind of bummed when a couple of them were drastically shortened. Life is Destroyed goes on forever and is boring as hell. The skull chasing you around that gets introduced halfway through just makes it even longer. So you end up running away from the switches you're hitting to turn the map for no reason other than to create more space between you and the skull. The camera angle in the boss fights can be a problem as the bosses can attack while off screen, but when they're all the way at the bottom of the screen, you have to get right up next to them to see them, which is a problem as some of them have big area of effect moves, so running up to them to see what they're doing can cause you to eat damage. So I've had to constantly try to keep the bosses on the north side of the screen purely because of the camera. I was aware of No More Heroes before playing this game, and was kind of aware of what Suda games were like in general from Lollipop Chainsaw, but I had a lot of fun with it. I'm assuming this is quite a departure from the normal games and everything, but writing, so even though I like this game, I don't really know what to think about No More Heroes still. I will say it has me interested enough to buy a remaster of No More Heroes 1 and 2 if they made it. Here's one more from Evaluating Name. What I enjoyed about TSA the most being new to the franchise was the accessibility. Combos are very simple and each move has a purpose, but with enough room to experiment without me feeling overwhelmed. And the ability to tweak with the difficulty is commendable. The ability of leveling a character at my own pace, knowing the game can be beaten at the lowest level with enough skill, but having the option to make the experience easier shows a sense of care to the player. In action games, the easier modes usually strip the game down in order to manipulate you into playing better, but TSA feels like a game that respects my choice of how I tackle it. I've had a sheep clip through the walls, and many a time has an enemy backed me into a corner and with nowhere to go, leaving me to just be combo fodder and with no real means to counter it, other than hoping Travis slips through. I'd say that the style and writing of Suda I've heard about has been really shown off well and has interested me. I want to see if the writing is just as good, the style just as strong, and a lot of suplexes. I'm invested into the series because of how much pure talent is on display here. So there you have it. While this handful of newcomers don't speak for everyone, it's interesting to see how well they took Travis Strikes Again, their criticisms, how much this new game encourages them to look into the original No More Heroes titles, and root for the third game's development. And that's all I have left to say about Travis Strikes Again. For now. So when can you expect the full analysis on this game as an entry to my Deadly Individualism series? Not for a good while, to be honest. I want to look over the game in its entirety, including the upcoming DLC chapters. All of it should be released by the end of April, so I imagine I won't have a full analysis fleshed out until sometime after that. If you haven't already, check out what I've released so far in my Deadly Individualism series while you wait for my analysis on Travis Strikes Again. I've covered his mainline Western titles up to Lollipop Chainsaw, and will soon release new entries covering Killer's Dead and Let It Die. Thanks for watching.